77 days. That's how long a U.S. Navy Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine can stay submerged without ever surfacing for air, sunlight, or a phone call home. Somewhere under an ocean whose name the Navy won't confirm, about 155 sailors are living inside a steel hull that doesn't open again until the mission says so. The Navy insists this isn't an emergency or a malfunction. It's just how the job works. It sounds almost impossible. No fresh air pumped in, no resupply, no going home if someone gets sick, gets homesick, or just gets sick of the same gray walls. And yet Ohio-class boats do this on a rotating basis year after year as declared national policy. So the real question isn't whether it's possible. It's how. How do you keep more than 100 people alive, sane, and mission-ready for 2.5 months without ever coming up? That's what we're covering here. The air, the water, the food, the sleep, the psychology, and why the Navy thinks all of that discomfort is worth it. Start with the basic problem. Breathing. A nuclear-powered submarine doesn't need to surface for fuel, since its reactor runs for years without refueling. But a reactor doesn't fix the fact that 150-plus people are consuming oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide every minute inside a sealed metal tube underwater. The fix is an oxygen generator, which uses electrolysis to split seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen goes into the boat's air. The hydrogen gets vented overboard. On the carbon dioxide side, the boat runs CO2 scrubbers, chemical systems that absorb the gas the crew breathes out before it builds up to dangerous levels. Trace contaminant systems filter out carbon monoxide and other fumes that would otherwise slowly poison a sealed space. None of this is new technology. It's decades old, refined repeatedly, and it means that in principle, the only real limit on how long a submarine can stay underwater is food and the crew's endurance, not air. Water works the same way. The boat doesn't carry 77 days of drinking water in tanks. It distills seawater instead, using evaporators or reverse osmosis systems, turning ocean water into drinking water, shower water, and cooking water. That takes a lot of energy, but a nuclear reactor has energy to spare. Here's the first real obstacle, though. None of these systems are perfectly reliable in a sealed environment for months at a stretch. Submariners describe the air aboard a boat on a long patrol as something that has to be actively managed around the clock. Equipment checked, filters swapped, chemistry tested, because a slow drift in air quality is invisible until it isn't. The Navy's answer is redundancy, multiple independent systems for oxygen generation and CO2 removal, so one failure doesn't put the boat on a clock. It's a solved problem now, but it wasn't solved by accident. It was solved by building backups for the one failure a submarine crew genuinely can't walk away from. Food is a different kind of challenge, and a more visible one. Before a patrol begins, an Ohio-class boat gets loaded with an enormous amount of provisions. Canned goods, frozen meat, dry stores, stacked so densely that early in a patrol sailors have described walking over boxes of food stored under decking and in passageways because there's no room to shelve it all at once. As the weeks pass and food gets eaten, the boat gradually clears out, and by the later stretch of a patrol, the crew is walking on the actual deck again instead of stepping over supplies. Meals are cooked fresh by a small galley crew working shifts around the clock, since with 150-plus people, the mess never really closes. Reading through Navy and submarine community accounts of patrol life, one detail kept coming up. Food on these boats is one of the only variables the crew can actually control. Menus, holiday meals, mid-rats midnight rations for sailors coming off the overnight watch become real morale events because so much else about the day is fixed by the mission and can't be adjusted for comfort. Sleep and workload follow their own logic, and it's stranger than you'd expect. For most of the Ohio-class SSBN's operational history, the Navy ran what's often called an 18-hour day at sea. 6 hours on watch, 12 hours off, repeated in a cycle that has nothing to do with the 24-hour rhythm the human body evolved around. That mismatch turned out to be a real problem. Studies of submarine crews found that watch schedules disconnected from a normal day-night cycle led to chronic sleep debt and fatigue, a serious issue on a boat where staying alert on watch is a safety requirement, not a nice-to-have. In recent years, the submarine force has shifted many crews to a circadian-based schedule. Watch rotations built around a standard 24-hour day instead of the older 18-hour cycle, specifically to cut fatigue and improve performance. It's a case of the Navy noticing its own system was working against its people and changing it. So the air is manageable. The water is manageable. The food stretches to cover the patrol. and the sleep schedule has been redesigned around human biology instead of tradition. On paper, the physical survival problem looks solved. What's harder to engineer around is what happens inside a person's head after 2 straight months with no sunlight, no privacy, and no way to just leave. That brings us to the crew rotation system that makes patrols like this sustainable at all: blue and gold. Every Ohio-class SSBN has 2 crews, not one, called blue and gold, and they alternate command of the same submarine. While one crew is at sea, the other is home, training, spending time with family, getting ready to take the boat out next. When the boat returns to port, the crews swap, and it can turn around for its next patrol far faster than if a single crew had to rest, retrain, and reprovision between every deployment. The idea isn't new. It traces back to rotating crew practices used to keep World War II submarine tenders running efficiently, and it was formalized for the Navy's ballistic missile fleet when the Polaris program began in the 1960s. The purpose hasn't changed: keep an expensive, strategically important submarine at sea as much as possible, while still giving the people who run it an actual life on land in between. What strikes me about the blue and gold system is that it's really an admission, not an efficiency trick. The Navy could have tried building submarines tough enough to need less maintenance, or crews trained to endure longer without rotation. Instead, decades ago, it looked at the problem and decided the boat could outlast any single crew. So the fix wasn't a better machine. It was 2 complete sets of people, a very human solution to a very human limitation. Before any sailor steps aboard for a deterrent patrol, they go through psychological screening, an evaluation meant to catch anyone who might struggle with prolonged isolation, confined spaces, or the specific stress of a submarine crew. For sailors who work directly with the boat's nuclear weapons or reactor, the Navy applies its Personnel Reliability Program, a formal screening and monitoring process used across the nuclear enterprise to check psychological fitness, reliability, and judgment on an ongoing basis, not just once. What's surprising isn't that this exists. You'd expect that for anyone near a nuclear weapon. It's that it never stops. A sailor can pass the screening before a patrol and still get pulled from nuclear-related duties later if something changes, because on a boat with no way to call for a psych evaluation mid-patrol, prevention has to do all the work. And prevention only goes so far, because isolation itself is the one obstacle no engineering fix can remove. There's no internet on patrol, no phone calls. For security reasons, an SSBN keeps strict communication discipline. Broadcasting anything could reveal its position, which defeats the whole point of the mission, so transmissions run almost entirely one way, into the boat, not out of it. Sailors typically get short, tightly limited messages from family, sometimes called family grams, that they can receive but not answer. A spouse might send 40 words about a kid's birthday. That's it. No reply, no follow-up question, just silence going back. Picture getting one line about your own kid's birthday and not being able to say anything back for weeks? Could you do 77 days of that? No calls, no messages out, no sunlight, just the same faces and the same gray passageways every day. Which raises the question we haven't answered yet. Why does the Navy consider all of this worth it? Why build an entire system, 2 crews, custom sleep science, continuous psychological monitoring around making sure a submarine can disappear for 2.5 months at a time? The answer isn't really about the submarine. It's about what the submarine represents. Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines are the sea-based leg of the U.S. nuclear triad alongside land-based missiles and long-range bombers. Of the 3 legs, the Navy and independent defense analysts consistently call the submarine leg the most survivable, precisely because of patrols like this one. A missile silo has a fixed, known location. A bomber can be tracked on radar and, in theory, caught on the ground. A submarine that stays submerged for weeks, moving quietly through a vast ocean, is extremely hard for an adversary to find, and a weapon an adversary can't find is a weapon it can't destroy in a first strike. That, according to Navy and Department of Defense statements, is the whole logic of continuous at-sea deterrence. As long as 1 or more SSBNs are hidden and ready at all times, no adversary can reasonably believe a surprise attack would wipe out America's ability to respond. The extended, undetected patrol isn't a side effect of the mission. It is the mission. The engineering keeps the crew alive. The rotation system keeps the program sustainable. But the reason any of it exists comes down to one strategic idea: survivability through invisibility. And that's exactly where the harder, less comfortable questions start. Here's a take that might not sit well with everyone, The hardest part of sustaining this mission today probably isn't the technology anymore. Oxygen generation, water reclamation, even circadian-friendly watch schedules are solved, mature engineering problems by now. The harder constraint is finding and keeping enough qualified people willing to disappear for 2.5 months at a time, with no contact home, on a rotating basis, year after year, in a labor market where that kind of sacrifice is a harder and harder sell. You can build a perfect life support system. You still need someone willing to live inside it. That tension shows up in how the Navy talks about submarine service. Recruiting materials and Navy statements frame extended deterrent patrols as a point of professional pride, probably because they have to. A mission this demanding only works if the people doing it believe it matters. Here's the part that doesn't fit the popular image of submarine duty. Sailors who've done it tend to describe it as boring more than frightening. Long stretches of routine, repeated system checks, the same watch rotation day after day. The danger isn't dramatic. It's the slow grind of sameness for weeks with no way out. So where does this actually stand today? The core facts are well established and not in dispute. Ohio-class SSBNs run deterrent patrols that the Navy and Defense reporting describe as regularly exceeding 2 months. The blue and gold crew system is real, decades old, and built specifically to maximize time at sea. Oxygen generation and water reclamation technology aboard nuclear submarines is mature and well documented in open Navy sources. Psychological screening and the personnel reliability program are confirmed, publicly described parts of how the Navy prepares nuclear-capable crews. What's genuinely not public, and shouldn't be expected to be, is the operational detail of any specific patrol. Exact routes, exact durations down to the day, or the identity and current position of any individual submarine. The Navy doesn't disclose that, for the same reason the whole system exists in the first place. Unverified claims about specific submarine movements online should be treated as exactly that, unverified, unless they trace back to an official Navy statement or credible defense reporting that names its sourcing. We didn't get into the classified specifics of how long a boat's food stores or filtration systems could theoretically stretch past what the Navy publicly states. Some of that detail just isn't public, for understandable reasons. If you want us to dig into how the Navy trains submarine crews for this kind of isolation specifically, drop a comment. What's left, in the end, is a fairly stark trade-off, openly acknowledged by the institution that runs it. The United States sustains one of the most survivable weapons systems in the world by asking roughly 155 people at a time to give up sunlight, contact with home, and a normal sense of days passing for months on end on a rotating and indefinite basis. The engineering makes it survivable. The blue and gold system makes it sustainable. And whether you'd personally accept that trade-off says something about what deterrence actually costs, not in dollars, but in the ordinary, human things a crew hands over every time the hatch closes. For primary sourcing on everything covered here, look at U.S. Navy and Department of Defense public statements on the submarine force and continuous at-sea deterrence, official releases from Commander, Submarine Force U.S., Pacific Fleet and Commander, Submarine Force U.S., Atlantic Fleet, and defense-focused reporting from outlets like USNI News and Naval News, which regularly cover submarine force policy, crew rotation, and life aboard SSBNs in detail.